And all of our panelists, Linda Clow, Sam Manahem, Jeffrey Mark Kelly, are spiritual teachers, they're practitioners, they're writers, they're lecturers, and great teachers of spirituality and the integration of spirituality and psychotherapy. You're going to hear much more about that tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to Sam Manahem for the initial presentation of the case, and then we're going to go at it. And this is a collaborative effort, so we're going to bring you into this discussion as well. We have left a sufficient amount of time for that. Sam, you're on.
Thank you, Bernie. When I was originally asked to present the case, I had somebody in mind. I'm not going to do that particular case. I'm going to do a different one after much discussion. I have to tell you one story from the first case because it exemplifies the way I do therapy. This first fellow was an engineer for the New York City, and he was for the sewer department, and he was a depressive, and so of course because he was in the sewer business, we had to talk about Ed Norton. How many people remember Ed Norton, right? So one day he came in, he was quite depressed. He sat down, I looked at him, he looked at me. Before he said a word, I did this. And that's what he did. He started laughing, and he said, "Damn it, I wanted to be depressed, but you snapped me out of it." So, snap me out of it. What does that sound like? Like a hypnotic trance. So one idea we might entertain is that life is a kind of hypnotic trance, and we don't want it to be a depressive one. So humor is very important. We're still not into our case we're going to present, but I've discovered the healing power of these. How could you possibly use these in psychotherapy? Well, you don't know me. I had a patient who was agoraphobic. We used to drive around together, and he would get very panic-stricken when he'd get too far from home. So we got too far from home, he panicked. I had these in my pocket. He started panicking, I put them on. I said, "Hey." He looked at me, again he cracked up, and he said, "Can I have those? Can I wear them when I drive?" I said, "I don't think the cops would be too happy about that. But you can keep them in your glove compartment," and part of my treatment plan was that whenever he'd get too panicky, he'd pull over, put these on, look in the mirror, laugh, and continue driving further. His goal was to get to the hospital, which was pretty far from his house, where his daughter was being born. It was about 20 years ago, and he got there with the Groucho. So I've discovered that you cannot panic and laugh at the same time. Right, Jeffrey? So some of my minor interventions. I was thinking about presenting tonight, and I only have really a very short time. So I thought, before I go into the case, to give you my 2-minute introduction of how I think of spirituality, psychology, and life. So here's my 2-minute intro. There is a oneness. Some people call it the Buddha nature, some people call it God, some people call it the universe. It doesn't matter what you call it. It is. That is our energetic source. That is what we really are. But we forget. We're exiled from that source. We get born into this world, physical world, and we get conditioned. We get conditioned into a set of beliefs. This is the province of psychology. So we all have a belief system, but we don't really think about it, unless we're psychologists or we're in therapy. And we live according to these beliefs. Out of the beliefs comes our life, comes our thought, comes our feelings, and as the Buddhists say, thoughts are things. So the thoughts, powered by the beliefs, which are basically anger, fear, and guilt, create the reality that we call our life. And some of them we take so for granted that we just think it's obvious. Then we have the body, okay? How many people here think they're their body? Raise hands. Oh, this is a real advanced group. How many people think they're their belief system? Come on. How many people think you're the oneness? Come on, everybody raise. Okay. So you're so advanced, you don't even need to hear this case, but I'm going to give you a case anyway. Out of this belief system comes the way we as psychospiritual therapists do psychotherapy. Now, medical doctors, if you're depressed and you go to a medical doctor, what are they going to say? You know, he's going to ask you questions like, are you sleeping, are you eating, are you crying all the time? And if you have what they call a clinical depression, which they would consider it biological, they're going to give you a pill, some Wellbutrin, some Paxil, some Prozac, and the cure. That's because they're only looking at the body. As psychologists, as psychotherapists, as healers, we are looking beyond that. So any psychologist will look at your belief system, your thoughts, and your feelings, and that's it. As spiritual therapists, we're looking at the source, and we're trying to find ways to help people connect to that source as an important part of the therapy that we do. Now, I don't know about the audience here. I mean, how many therapists? A lot? Okay, a lot of therapists. So I'm sure everybody who's a therapist works on thoughts, feelings, and beliefs. So I want to go into this case. The case is a 43-year-old woman. She first came to me about 3 years ago. We had about 6 months of therapy. This was the presenting problem. I'm 40 years old. I'm interested in having children and getting married, but I'm with this man. I've been with him for several years, and I don't think he's the right person to have a family with. So I asked her to describe this man, and she told me he was a musician, and he was very charming, and he was a great musician and a great sex partner, and there were many things that she liked about him. However, he was very controlling and angry. So, of course, you always ask about the background. So her family background is, guess what her father was like? Controlling, angry, and alcoholic. And the boyfriend is controlling, angry, and alcoholic. Turned out she had been married from ages about 24 to 27. And the marriage broke up because her husband was controlling, alcoholic, and angry. So she didn't want to marry this fellow just to have a child, and she had, symptomatically, what she had was somewhat of a depression. I don't know if I'd call it a clinical depression. I would call it enough anxiety that if she'd gone to a doctor, they would have given her a tranquilizer, because she had a lot of anxiety and fear that she was never going to do what she wanted to do. By the way, she's a successful professional woman, important part of her life. She's an administrator at a hospital, and she has a pretty high position. And on the side, she sells real estate, and she's successful at that. So she lives in a nice place. She has a good job. But she feels something is missing. She has the boyfriend, but something is not right with the boyfriend. And what do I do? So we began at the psychological level, and after discussing her family background, she's the youngest of 4 children. I asked if she was abused, and she said, well, she was yelled at a lot and controlled. One of the things her father used to do when she would be coming home from school, he'd tell her, get in the house, get in the house. I'm not leaving you on the street to do all these boys after you and everything. So she was not allowed a normal social life, even as a teenager. I asked if she was physically abused. She said she was only hit one time, and that was scary, but she had her oldest sibling, a sister, was beaten regularly. And yeah, I know, it's very sad. Her oldest sister was beaten regularly, and she saw it. And I said, well, so how did you deal with that? And she said, I was good. So all the therapists here, and maybe you don't even have to be a therapist to know that she became kind of an enabler and had a pleasing, placating personality, and that's still what she has. She's a very, very nice person. If she was here and you met her, you'd probably like her. Most people like her. But she's got this anxiety and depression problem, and she's got this boyfriend problem. So we discussed it, and after about 6 months of therapy, I should also mention that I always discuss spirituality as part of my therapy. As an Ericksonian hypnotherapist, I believe in utilization, which means utilize what the person comes in with. Speak their language. I don't just mean English, I mean speak their language, speak the way they speak, and speak to them in a way they can understand. So you speak differently to different people. So I asked about spirituality. She was born Catholic. She did not really relate to it. Her mother was extremely religious and went to church daily. The father was not religious at all and drank daily. That was his religion, apparently. So her problem, she thought, was the boyfriend, and that she had this kind of depressive, anxious way of looking at her life, and what should she do? So we pretty quickly got to the psychological part, was that she was attracted to the energy of people like her father. She was married to a man like her father. She was now going out with a boy like a man like her father. And she said, I can't break up with him. So at that point, she got some insight, but she didn't want to continue therapy. So she dropped out of therapy because she felt if she couldn't break up with the boyfriend, she couldn't make any progress. Well, this was about 3 years ago. So a year or so, or a year and a half passed by. She called me back. I had forgotten this piece, but I'll tell it to you now because it's an important piece of the therapy from the spiritual viewpoint. When we discussed her lack of interest in Catholicism, I said, you know, you might like the Unity Church. Some of you may know what the Unity Church has, very metaphysical beliefs. They believe in the oneness of all things. They believe in affirmative prayer. So even though she wasn't coming to therapy, she joined a Unity Church, and she really loved it, and that helped her. And apparently she got the strength through prayer and through going to the Unity Church. She did break up with the first guy, who was both psychologically and physically abusive. But now she was with another guy. She said, he's much nicer. I said, good, you're making progress. She says, you know, I don't think he's abusive. Okay, that's good. You know, and she told me he was nice to her, and it turns out, though, he was 10 years older than her. This might interfere with her goal of having children because he already had a teenage daughter with whom he didn't get along very well. And she actually did very well with the teenage daughter, but the boyfriend didn't. He also worked, this important piece, that works with her at the same hospital. So the more we found out about this particular boyfriend, the more we found out that he was really not very appropriate. At first we worked on her talking to him, and she did this. Talk to him. Is he interested in having another child? Because this is very important to you. And if you're going to get married, you should marry someone that's interested in having a child because it's so important to you. So she did, and he said yes. But there was a problem. The problem was everywhere she went, everyone she talked to, he was there. You know, what they would call this a little bit like a stalker almost. But he would always deny it because they worked in the same place. He would say, oh, no, I was just coming in for something else. He'd be lurking in the shadows. No, I just happened to be there. He always had an excuse. The more we found out about him, the more we found out that he was a very, very deeply insecure person, extremely possessive, extremely jealous. So once again, did some assertiveness training, and what she had to do was assert herself and say, you know, I am not doing anything out of line. She had a lot of guilt, though, because of her father. And there was nothing to feel guilty about. She wasn't doing anything. She was just having normal days, talking to people, going out with friends, and this would not be a comfortable way to live with paranoid. Eventually, she did break up with this man, but then she went back with him. So,
Sam, could we just take a pause there?